Hello everybody and welcome back to the Serpentine Snipes channel. Today we are going to be showing you a beginner's guide to Valorant and what concepts you need to learn to get better at the game. If you like this type of content, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified whenever we post a video. So now, without any further ado, let's hop into this beginner's guide on how to get better at Valorant. Okay, let's hop right on into the first section, aiming. Aiming is a very wide and complicated subject in Valorant where you really need to learn each weapon's mechanics and your own sensitivity incredibly well. But we're just going to break it down pretty simple for you. First of all, pick the right sensitivity for you. If you play other games, great. Just go to one of the many sensitivity converter websites online, and I'll put one in the description for you to check out. If you don't play any other games, that's going to be a bit more complicated. First, set your mouse to a consistent DPI that you're going to use across all of your games. Second, go into the Valorant practice range and adjust your sensitivity in-game, which is displayed right on the front of the bot training area, and then test it and move it around until you approximately can move across your entire mouse pad with your mouse and do pretty much a exact 180-degree turn. Of course, this can vary depending on if you think you're going to like a higher or lower sensitivity, but just know in Valorant, lower is usually better. But if you're really confident that you think, and even after a few games maybe, that you can really hit those headshots and move around well, then maybe work on a higher sensitivity. Second of all, let us move into the next subject. Okay, let's move into the second part of aiming that you need to learn. For this, it's going to be crosshair placement. This can also be called pre-aiming, so we're going to be using that term interchangeably. What this is being able to move around a corner or hold an angle and in general aim where their head is going to be, not where it was. So how you can learn this is mostly just by practice, but also by peeking from multiple angles around the range and just getting used to where the average head is going to be at certain distances. An excellent way to train this on flat ground is to go to the target area, which is where you will also practice recoil control, and look at the target dummy to the right of it. If you move it to whatever range you want to work on and then peek around that corner to the right of it, you're going to get a general feel on where their head might be if they're moving through certain positions in your frame of view. But mostly, the best way to practice this is just to be mindful in game. You want to constantly be thinking, is my crosshair in a position where I can just fire without having to look back? And for the final section of aiming, this is flicking. It's going to be a pretty short section because flicking is something that you just need to work on in the practice range and through games, but there are certain ways that you can get better at being able to directly flick your crosshair to their head. First of all, run through a couple of rounds of easy bots in the shooting range. This will just get you warmed up for your flicking. But if you want to intensely practice, maybe later on in the day, I would recommend medium or using peek flicking, which is when you peek a corner, don't definitely know where they are, and flick to them, using the eliminate 50 feature and peeking from a corner far away with an op or a marshal. This is really helpful because it will teach you to read where they are and flick your crosshair directly to it. And also, this should have been in the sensitivity area, but it's most important for flicking. You want to keep your sensitivity consistent. That will help you hit the most shots and undoubtedly make your play better. Rolling right on into the next section. This is recoil control. Spray control is another term that you might hear being thrown around, but I prefer recoil control because recoil control encompasses both burst firing and spray firing methods, while spray control only really talks about spraying. First of all, what are the methods of shooting? There are three main ones. There's tapping, there's burst firing, and there's spraying. Tapping is as it sounds. You tap one at a time and try and get headshots. This is usually for long range and for everything with the snipers. Then we have burst firing. This can be used with any gun other than the snipers and a few others. Some, like the Bulldog, even when scoped, have it automatically set on a burst rifle mode. I find this really neat. This is when you spray 3, 4, or 5 bullets usually in a row as a burst, but don't let your recoil get too out of control. Then let it fully reset back down and start bursting again. This is really helpful at medium to long range if you're confident that you can control the first 4 bullets. Then we have spraying, which is what everyone seems to think about when recoil control, and it is for good reason. Spraying is what you're going to be doing a lot of the time, and if you can master spray patterns, then you are going to get really good and be able to take gunfights way more easily and with no sweat. This is when you're continuously spraying for multiple seconds at a time, usually 10 to 15 bullets. First of all, what you need to think about is what gun you're going to be manning. Within the community, there are 2 main guns that the developers seem to be pushing for as the main guns and really are what you're going to be spending most of your time on, which are the Vandal and the Phantom. You sort of want to choose what gun you want to be using most of the time, especially for newer players, because it is going to be very easy for you to get the hang of it if you only have to focus on one pattern. There's also the Odin, which has become pretty big from at the beginning of the game, not being a used weapon. This is another weapon that you should be practicing the recoil of. Also, try and use weapons that you might be using on save rounds, such as the Frenzy, which is the only automatic pistol, and some of the SMGs. They are really strong on save rounds, and if you can use them, you're going to get some early dubs and mess up the other team's economy. Okay, so all this talk of practicing spray control, how do I do that? So what you can do is go into the range and go to the target section. Then set it to whatever range you want. I usually practice on 20 meters and try and keep the spray control within the first 2 circles. It's going to be really awesome for taking those long-range gunfights, and you can feel a lot more confident when peeking any angle with any weapon. I definitely recommend spending a lot of your practice time on this, because this is really what makes great players great and can demote you from a good player to a mediocre player very fast. Another really useful skill that comes with recoil control is spray transfers. This is when you have to transfer your spray without resetting it to another enemy from the first engagement. A really awesome way to practice this so that you can go into those close quarters situations in game very confident is to go into the practice range, go to bot, click on the practice setting. Then that should spawn in a bunch of bots that you can transfer your spray in between, and it can work on crosshair fluidity and just your confidence in game when you're going into very tight quarters that there might be multiple enemies, like sewers on Split. And rolling right on into the next section, we have movement. Movement is how you move around the map, and more specifically, how you use movement to your advantage in gunfights. This requires a mastery of mechanics, but knowing these mechanics can help you consistently perform better in one-on-one gunfights, especially when you're holding an angle or peeking an angle on offense. The first important type of movement is peeking. There are multiple types: jiggle peeking, crouch peeking, and jump peeking. But we're only going to go in-depth on jiggle peeking. There might be more guides in the future that go specifically in-depth in movement because it's such a broad category. So, jiggle peeking. This is when you're holding sprint and moving back and forth very rapidly with the A and D keys. These keys are the left and right side keys if you don't know. Whatever other binds you're using can also apply. What you're going to do with this is go around the corner and then back very fastly, but also it's awesome for early round because you can sprint peek, but they have like a 2 or 3 second lag where if you only go a few feet and then back and don't sprint in one direction for too long, it won't give off the sound. so you can peek and angle very fast so that you can't get damaged, while also not showing up on the enemy's mini-map or letting them get an audio cue that you're there. This is awesome because you can get intel and you can entry frag sort of secretly, and you have the power to go into engagements with all of the info and letting your opponents have close to none. Yeah, as you can tell, that's pretty impressive and important for the gameplay. The second important type of movement is something that people don't classify as movement much, but I like to. This is how you move around the map on rotations. Most important things about this are when to sprint with your knife, and what routes to take. First of all, when to sprint. This is a pretty basic one, but it's pretty important. If you didn't already know, on your minimap it shows up how far away the enemies can hear you when you're sprinting. So if you want to make a rotation, if you're going through spawn, you want to be watching that minimap to see if you're within range of angles they could possibly be holding, mostly just the sight. Another thing that you need to think of is when to sprint with your knife out. Because as you probably know, but if you didn't, I'll tell you, sprinting with your knife out makes you faster. But if you have your knife out, you're not prepared to stop and take a gunfight at any time if they're lurking in mid. So, what time would you use your knife when you're sprinting? My answer to this is if you've cleared a sight and you're far away from the other one. You can pull out your gun as you get closer, and then as you're even closer still, you can stop sprinting so you don't emit noise. So a basic roadmap is leaving sight, you're sprinting, rotating to where you're going to be moving through, you're sprinting with the knife out. Then you switch to the gun so that you can clear mid and while sprinting, but then by the time you clear mid, you're probably near sight, so you should stop sprinting and walk so that they don't get the intel on you. Those are the basics of moving, and I'll probably add a peeking guide and a rotations guide because they're very important. Okay, the next and final section, but it encompasses a lot, is game sense. Game sense is the knowledge of the game and your decision making within each round and the overall span of the game. To start off, we have ability usage. Ability usage is extremely important because it is all about utility, taking sites, retaking sites, and holding sites. It is the way that you enhance your gunplay within the game. So, it's really hard to go over all of ability usage in one general video, so I'll probably be releasing agent guides to your request. But basically, you want to think twice about using your utility early on in the round. So, the general gist is you want to use your utility that is your natural ability. So, for example, Sova darts, the recon bolts, you're going to use those as early as you can to gain the initial intel. Because you can always get them later in the round so that you can see where the enemies are trying to retake. And, for example, omen smokes. Those are smokes that you want to use really, really early in the round because they're long lasting, and you can get them back for a second round later, again to stop retakes. But most entry fragger utility is completely useless by the end of the round. Of course, not completely, but you know what I mean. So your job is to go in there with all of your abilities and flush it out, because your role is to work in first and get the initial pick. So you're not going to wait till later, because by later, your utility is not at the point where it's supposed to be used. Those are the things that consist of ability usage and ability knowledge. The next big section of game sense is map knowledge. Of course, map knowledge only comes with you playing the game more often, but here are some ways that it can help your gameplay. If you know common areas that people are going to be coming through or common choke points, maybe you want to hold that and focus on utility there. You know certain ledges that you can put smokes on, maybe create a one-way smoke with it. You know how enemies commonly hold a site, for example, split on B. You can just think about it, and that's how you're gonna sweep in on your attack. You really gotta think about the map. This is sort of like crosshair placement earlier, where it's something that you can only work on and get better by actively thinking in-game. How does this map choice affect what I'm going to do? And how does their positioning in past rounds affect what I'm going to do? And what are common choke points that can affect what I'm going to do? That's really all that it's about, but it can be really difficult to learn. I'd recommend also walking through some custom games so that you can learn common points and maybe ideas where you can use your agent-specific utility. And something that I think would be perfect to wrap up this video is positioning and decision making. So this is similar to last one, but it's how you use that map knowledge to find positions that you can hold and when to change those positions. So for defense, you're going to want to find places that can hold common angles that attackers will come through, and maybe go to the site that your utility is more useful at. And what you can think about is, where am I going to set up any traps I have? Am I going to clear early or sit back and wait? If you like sitting on long angles, I would just hold there. You don't need to try and do insane wall bangs. You just sit there and hold your angle. But if you like clearing out mid or these jam-packed areas like garage on Haven, then you might want to go in with like a shotgun or position yourself at a really close angle like some of the doors on a lot of the maps, because mostly doors, and especially destructible doors, are choke points that can turn into very fast but skillful short-range gunfights. So if you are specialized at those, you can sit there. If you want to get early intel, maybe you go into middle and try and get off a sneaky Sova dart. That's what you need to think about when you're thinking about positioning. It's all of what I've talked about into one. How confident are you in your recoil control? Do you think you can flick to their head if you come out of one angle and they're at many? Do you think you can hold multiple angles? Do you think you can use your utility to clear off an entire site? That's what you need to think about when you're thinking of, where do I position and where should I tell my teammates to? Okay, that's the core of Valorant. Hope you enjoyed the guide. And yeah, peace out.